there, this is Crystal, and I'm back with another layout using my October stash kit. When I was going through all of the elements that I put in this kit for the last layout, I couldn't help but notice these couple of die cuts from the Hip Kit Club Home Sweet Home die cut ephemera pack that I put in my kit. And I knew that I had this photo taken recently of my morning latte, and I decided to pull all of the things that are kind of in this same color scheme. So I'm going for a monochromatic layout, pretty much monochromatic layout in these tones of blue and teal. And I've pulled everything out. This is, I think, enough to put together this layout, but I think I want to start with some mixed media. So I'm going to clear all of this away and get out my watercolors and create a background first. I'm starting with a sheet of basil marshmallow cardstock that I've already covered in white gesso, and then I've pulled out 4 different Lindy's Stamp Gang powders and shakers and a spray, and that's what I'm going to use to start with. I want to create just a cluster of watercolor underneath where my photo is going to go, and I'm planning to put my photo kind of off to the left side. So I just sprinkled some of the powder. I think this is the tilt-a-wheel teal that I started with. I just sprinkled some of it onto the paper, and then I sprayed it with water, and I love that effect. It's so beautiful, but I wanted it to be a bit smoother, so I grabbed a brush, and I'm just going to spread it around a little bit. And it was looking a little bit bluer than I wanted to, so I grabbed a yellow Lindy's. I don't remember the name of this one, but I will link everything down below. And I added just a little bit of it to get a more teal color. And it looks super, super dark right now. This is the scary part of mixed media, but trust me, in the end, it all comes out just fine. So I'm just mixing those colors. I don't want them completely mixed. I'm trying to get some variation, and you saw me there grab a piece of paper to hold it up next to it. I was trying to get a similar color to that paper. So that's what I was doing. And then I just lifted up some of the color with the paper towel, just because this is just the first layer, so I know I want to add more layers on top of this, and I don't want them to blend, so I'm going to go ahead and dry this partially with my heat gun, and then I can add the next layer. So to do that, I'm taking a little bit of a different blue color, and I'm just adding it to my mixed media mat there and adding a bit of water to it, and then I'm going to add some shading in particular areas. This just gives me more control than I would have if I had put it directly on the page. So I added just a little bit for some shading and some variation to the top and bottom. And then once again, I'm going to hit it with the heat gun to dry that a little bit before I add the next layer. I don't want them to completely mix. I want there to be some distinct different colors on the page. So this is the darkest blue that I have. This is the shaker, and I shook some out, but I got way too much on my mat, so I just lifted some of it back up and put it into, back into the container. And then I added some water again and mixed it up a little bit, and I'm going to use my brush and add it just in a couple different places on my page. So again, it looks super dark and scary at first, but once it dries, it actually lightens up quite a bit. And this time I'm using the heat gun to kind of move the water around so I get some different lines, and it just kind of adds some interest to the background. I really like the look of the mixed media dried with the heat gun. It's a much different look than if it dries naturally. So once I have all of that done and pretty much dried, not completely dried, but pretty much dried, I'm going to add some splatters. And I dried it first because if you don't, then the splatters just kind of blend into the background. And if you dry it first, then you get some kind of distinct dots onto the page. So that's what I did. I added both of the blue colors that I already had on my mat, and then I got that yellow back out, added a bit of it to the blue at the top, and got that teal color again. Splattered all of that, and then I set that aside for a while to dry. But I'm not quite done with mixed media yet. I want to do some stenciling. So this is a page about coffee. I thought I would use my Vicki Boutin stencil and a Hero Arts ink in soft brown, and I'm using just a little dauber tool from scrapbook.com. Again, everything will be linked down below, and I'm just kind of dabbing the ink onto the page through the stencil to get those kind of coffee rings, the coffee cup rings onto the page. Okay, so I finished the mixed media. Now I've cleaned it all up and set it aside to dry completely. And while it's drying, I'm going to work on the layers behind my photo. So I'm just trimming out my photo. It's a square photo, but I printed it on a 4x6 piece of paper, so it had some white space above and below. So I just trimmed that out, and then I'm going to figure out what papers I want to layer up behind it. So I'm kind of debating between these two darker blues. One is greener, one's more teal, and one's more blue. And I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use on the page, so I'm just kind of auditioning all of that to figure out which one works best. And I realized that I'm definitely going to need white matte around my photo, so I grabbed just a sheet of copy paper, super thin copy paper. I put it in the corner thinking I would just trim around it, but I decided to tear it instead just to give it a little bit more texture. And I hadn't left much space on the left side of my photo, so I had a bit of trouble trying to tear that edge, but just used a ruler and held it down in place and then lifted up the paper. Because it's just copy paper, it tears really easily. So that's going to be my first layer, and then the next layer is going to be this paper from Cedar Lane, from Pink Paisley, and I just did a thin border of that, and I'm going to distress the edges a bit just with the edge of my scissors. And then next up, I'm going to add a layer of this paper with the white leaves on it. This is a Hip Kit Club paper from that Home Sweet Home collection from the kit from last November. So I added that around the blue, and then I had this tiny little piece. It was part of a branding strip. I think it was from the Vicky Bouton paper, but I'm not positive. But yeah, I had just a little strip of that, so I added it to the left side of the photo, and then I used that 4x6 paper from Studio Calico to give a dark border around the whole thing. And again, I'm going to distress that. So I'm distressing some and not others. I think that just adds some interest, and I don't like things to look too messy, too distressed, so I try to keep I like the distress look for texture, but I try to keep it to a minimum just to keep it from looking too busy or too messy to my eye. So the final layer is going to be this glittered paper from American Crafts. Again, this is from a really old collection that I can't even remember the name of, and I tried to look it up and I couldn't even find it online to figure out what it was called. But it's just this really pretty kind of teal, green, bluish color, but it is glittered, so there are these glittered polka dots all over it. So I did add just tape runner to the back of those layers behind my photo before adding it, but it's not going to hold. You'll see me have to come in with some liquid glue to get it to stick here in a minute. But right now I'm just playing with the embellishments that I had pulled out. I added that coffee cup and the little "Let's Get Cozy" phrase die cut. I added some leaves and another circle die cut. So you can see there's kind of a diagonal pattern that I'm working with, adding a cluster to the top left and the bottom right that just follows that line of mixed media across the page. And I also grabbed the little fall clip that I had pulled out from my kit, and I really want to include that, but these paper clips are kind of strange. If you actually clip it behind a photo or the layers, you're not going to actually be able to read the words. So instead, I just kind of tucked that little circle die cut that says hello into the clip, and that way you'll be able to read what it says, and then it'll say hello fall instead of just fall. And I'm just going to glue that down with a foam dot here in a minute. Okay, so I added liquid adhesive behind my layers because I used gesso and mixed media on the background. My tape runner is definitely not going to stick to it, so I need to glue everything down with liquid adhesive, even the things that were already sticky, just to make sure that they stick. Things don't always like to stick to gesso. I'm also adding some foam dots behind that little die cut phrase that said "Let's Get Cozy." I want that to stand out on top of my layers and beneath my photo. That cup, the little coffee cup, is on top of my photo, and I want the "Let's Get Cozy" to be above it, so it needed to have some foam squares behind it. So again, just adding some liquid glue to these die cuts at the top, and then figuring out what else I can add to this cluster just to finish it out. I tried that little die cut from October Afternoon, but it just didn't work. It wasn't the right size. It was covering up too much of the other things that I have in that cluster, and it had a little speech bubble in it. It was just not in the right place, so I had to abandon that. And you saw I just adhered that down with a foam dot behind the die cut circle, and that's the only adhesive I'm going to use on that one, and it seems to be working just fine. So I did add a little acetate leaf to the bottom cluster. That was one that I had used for my last, or I had added adhesive to through a Xyron machine for my last layout and didn't use it, so I just stuck it on this one since it was the right color. And then I added a little puffy heart from Ali Edwards, and I thought about adding one of these little phrase stickers, but it just didn't fit, and I couldn't get it to work. Same with this little arrow sticker. It just didn't quite look right. Everything was starting to look too busy, so I found it best just to leave those off. But I am going to add a few enamel dots. I had pulled those out from Echo Park. They are actually from the coffee collection. I'm not sure what it was called, but a super recent coffee collection from Echo Park. I had those there, but I really wanted something that was in that same color as the ink I had used, so I went to my stash and found these super old ones from Prima. They were the perfect kind of light brown latte color. So I added a few of those, and there is where I finally figured out that I needed to add liquid glue between my layers and that glitter paper, so I went ahead and did that. And I'm just adding those enamel dots, and then I'm going to finish off the page with a few splatters. I dug way back into my stash and had a sprinkler, I think they were called, from October Afternoon in that same kind of light brown latte color. So I added a few sprinkles of that and the date stamp in that same soft brown ink. And then that's going to be it for this page. So there are some close-up photos coming up so you can really see the layers and see all the beautiful color in the background. I really love how this one turned out. I hope that you enjoyed it as well. If you did like it, please do give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that you enjoyed this video and that I should do more of it. And if you haven't already subscribed, I would love for you to subscribe. I'd love to see you back here on my channel. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all back here soon.